I think so, yeah.
Yeah. I should know by now, but
All right, so it looks like we're live now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our 55th episode of What's a Tea here at South Suburban Family Shelter. Thank you to those who have stuck with us since the beginning. Today we have a special episode. We're kind of transitioning from May, which was Mental Health Awareness Month, and June celebrates a couple of things, but it's also Men's Health Awareness Month. And so we're going to talk a little bit about domestic violence amongst men and how it affects their mental health and things of that nature. So we do realize, as we spoke in a previous episode in May, that mental health is something that we are slowly talking about a little bit more, but that stigma for men's mental health is still there. Men's mental health is not talked about as much as women's mental health. And so we're going to talk about some of the facts, and some of the ways that we can help. So I know some of you already know Jennifer Gabrania. She is our executive director and she is our guest speaker today. Hello, Jennifer. How are you today?
I'm good.
Doing good. Had a good 3-day weekend.
I did have a good 3-day weekend. Yes. Thanks for asking.
That's awesome. So everybody brew your tea, bring your tea. I've got water today, but you can drink whatever you're drinking. And just so you all know, there will be time at the end of the episode. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to type them in the comments section. One thing that Jennifer and I wanted to disclose is that, we're going to talk about men's health and, everything that we've read, the stats that we've seen. That's basically where we're going to talk on, or what we're going to speak on. But we don't know exactly from their point of view, from a man's point of view, from their perspective. So if there's anything that we're saying that seems a bit off or not accurate, feel free to correct us. We like to learn from you all as well. Isn't that right, Jennifer?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We're going to talk about what we've seen and experienced, but we are not men. We've never been men. I've never been a boy. So there's a whole lot I don't know.
Yeah. So let's jump right into talking about just what services do we here at South Suburban Family Shelter, what do we offer for men?
Well, everything that we do pretty much is available for men. A lot of people don't think that is the case, though. So a lot of people assume that a domestic violence agency only provides services to women because they are primarily thinking that domestic violence is only experienced by women, and that is not at all the case. So every time you hear us talking about our services, you come on to What's the Tea and someone talks about the work that they do. Everything that we do is available to men as well. And men are about 5% of the people that we serve who identify as being victimized by domestic violence are men. Obviously, in our partner abuse intervention program, we've talked about that, I think, a little bit more extensively. That's a program that is majority men that are in that program. So we see most of the men coming to our agency participating in that program.
Great. Yeah, so we have services for men who are domestic violence victims as well as perpetrators. So we have services for women in the same way.
Yes.
And you're right. There's a lot of people who think that domestic violence agencies only offer services for women, but that is not the case. We offer counseling for men. We offer a lot of different services for men as well. So I found this stat really interesting from the CDC website. It said 1 in 4 men in the US will experience rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner violence. But even so, men are reluctant to report their abuse or seek help. So why do we think that men might be reluctant to report their abuse or seek help?
So oftentimes, the way that our society expects men to be, men and boys, I'll probably talk about men and boys instead of exclusively men. There is this idea and these expectations of what it means to be a man or a boy, or what it means to be masculine. And a lot of that is wrapped around this idea of being tough and in charge and in control. So if someone is not seen to be any of those things, then they are stigmatized and marginalized. sometimes made fun of. So that's something that we actually literally see. You see that in a lot of media and movies and TV shows. If a man or a boy is being depicted as being abused, particularly if they're being abused by a cisgender appearing woman, that they are laughed at, or it's joked about, or it isn't taken seriously. So all of these messages and beliefs are reasons why, if someone is a man and it is being abused in any kind of way, they may not trust or believe that they're going to be helped or treated the way they would want to be treated if they disclose that, which is incredibly sad, because that is only going to impact their mental health, their ability to heal and deal with the trauma they've experienced in negative ways.
Exactly. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be the case. And that's one of the things that we as a society need to work on. They shouldn't have all these negative stigmas towards men who are victimized and seeking help. But unfortunately, a lot of time, if a man does talk about their emotions or talks about being victimized in a relationship, it for others it shows a sign of weakness, and that's how they feel. They feel like they need to man up, or oftentimes they're even told that they need to man up, which results in them repressing their feelings and not talking about their feelings, not getting help, which can lead to even, bigger problems like other mental illnesses, depression, anxiety, any other. So it could lead to a lot of different things. And you also mentioned how 5% of our of the people that we help at South Suburban Family Shelter are men. But it's difficult to find this stat, but it's roughly around 20% of victims are male. But I was looking at different websites and found different percentages, but they all range around 20%. So if we
Yeah,
only see 5%.
Yeah, I imagine it's hard to know.
Yeah,
Because in anything that you're going to read, it's based on research, which is based on somebody disclosing that, checking that
exactly.
box or telling someone what happened. So I think for the most part, people really do think that it's skewed. Because even if it's anonymous, the person still has to admit it to themselves or feel like they can even check that box. And do they? Because the stigma is so incredibly strong. To even admit it to oneself can be extremely difficult to do, because of what does that mean about me, and we deny men and boys that full range of emotions.
Exactly.
And
Yeah, that
and they,
makes a lot of sense.
yeah, they
That's
they
not even something that I was thinking about. Is like, you have to admit it to yourself.
uh-huh.
Honestly, I was just thinking, so how can they get these numbers when a lot of people don't report it? But aside from the fact that they don't report it, a lot of people don't even know or want to admit that they're being victimized.
Yeah. So I mean, anything, when people read like crime statistics, or if you see something in the news that says, this many cases, that the police department responded to, that's a very small sample that you're looking at, because those are people that actually reached out to some kind of authority. I mean, even if you look at, our services, like, yeah, we have some numbers, but those are only the people that reached out to us. And that's
Yeah,
really the small percentage. Most people don't actually go to a specific agency or reach out in some kind of formal way for all sorts of reasons, but when there's additional barriers that exist, then that number is going to be even lower. So I really don't think that we fully know um, how much it occurs and what it really looks like, because there's so much stigma attached.
yeah, and this is something that we have on our PowerPoints when we go and do presentations, and that's, it's kind of difficult to explain to the students, is that, well, these stats say this and this and that, but really we just don't know.
Yeah. Like, we know what we read. And I got to the point when I did a lot of trainings is always like, well, explaining the research, right? Like, this is what I'm looking at and this is what it's telling me, but that's only based on this
Yeah,
information.
yeah, you've got to look a little further. Definitely. If moving on a little bit, let's talk about how you think these stigmas and the fact that it isn't easy or simple for men to get help when they are being victimized. How is this affecting their mental health?
Well, if we think about kind of trauma in general, I think that can be a helpful way to look at it, because experiencing domestic violence or any kind of abuse is experiencing a trauma. And we know how trauma impacts people. So that's going to be relatively kind of similar across experiences and whatnot. So when you're isolated and trapped and not able to do anything to address the trauma, that you have, that just it just degrades your mental health even more. So often you see people having high rates of anxiety, high rates of depression. Obviously, there's post-traumatic stress disorder that people are experiencing, and that really can bleed into every single part of your life. And it can be, it can really lead to feelings of hopelessness and helplessness if people don't see that there's any way out. And that's the piece that's really scary, because there is more and more information out there, I think, about places where people can get help. It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone who sees those advertisements thinks that help is for them. So, like when we opened up, right, most people don't think a domestic violence agency is for men. So it's almost, because that's such an ingrained message, even if we put the information out there in a very gender neutral manner, which we try to do, we try to put a lot of efforts here at SSFS to do that, people still have to see us as
Yeah.
that kind of a place that's available to them. And all of the information and stories they tell themselves and experiences they have can still counter whatever message we're giving. So then there isn't this feeling that there's an outlet, or there's a way out. And that can be very damaging to people's mental health. But we're learning more and more how closely linked the mental health is with the physical health.
Yes. Yeah, I can see how that can be difficult when a message is already so ingrained in society to try and get that, to try and change it. And it's difficult for people who are in a situation where they feel like they don't have help. There isn't help available for them. So I can
Yeah,
definitely see that.
yeah, there's definitely a piece when you hear people talk about their survivor stories. There's somewhere in the story where they're talking about how power shifted for them in some kind of way, where they were able to feel more powerful, or they were able to feel more control of their life. So if people can't access that in some kind of way, that inhibits that journey, that journey towards healing, and then feeling as though they are able to survive and then thrive away from or beyond what those experiences have been.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you feel like you're stuck in a situation, you're focusing a lot on that and not focusing on thriving or, just trying to better yourself.
Yeah, and
So
for some
there's,
people who never reach out to formal services, they at least might try to talk to people around them. So when we're talking, about men who have been abused, I don't know how often men feel like they have people that they can talk to about it. They're From some of the things that I've read, it sounds like they may be more likely to talk to female friends about it rather than male friends. So if they
that's
have
what I was thinking.
female family members in their lives, I'm kind of drawing a little bit back on, it's like that one book I listened to that I keep bringing up every time we talk, that's, the boys talked about, they were more likely to talk to female friends, or like their mom, a female family member. So if they've got those people around them, maybe they've got someone that they can talk to about it. But it has to be incredibly lonely and isolating if you truly believe no one's going to understand
Exactly.
what's
Yeah,
happening.
that's the same thing that was crossing my mind is when we spoke about how men in general, or according to the book that you read, feel more comfortable speaking to women about their feelings, about their emotions and their problems. And so if there is a man who's experiencing domestic violence, There's even barriers to going to someone and telling them how they feel or telling them the situation, because oftentimes they do get judged. Similar to women, similar to just people in general, but men, there's this greater stigma around men. And I'm sure they think, if I tell somebody, are they going to understand me? Are they going to judge me? Are they even going to believe me? So there's all these stigmas and different reactions that they get from the general public if they do open up to somebody.
Right. And these are all things that folks worried about, when agencies were first, way back, we still worry about it now, but it was a bigger thing, early on before agencies and public education and advocacy was in place. Like, people have always been very worried about, am I going to be believed? Is anybody going to help me? Are they going to judge me and think and look down on me? And we have made some headway on that for women and girls who have experienced abuse, but not so much for men and boys. There hasn't been nearly as much. Maybe for boys a little bit more, depending on what it is, because they're younger. And so there's some factors around there that allow for people to suspend their judgment a little bit more. But for men, those expectations in society of how men are supposed to be, I keep imagining the man box, and I kind of wish we should have brought it
Yeah.
up. But this box of, you are only allowed to be these things in here, and if you move out of it, bad things are going to happen to you if you try to do anything outside of that.
Yes. Yes. And inside this man box, you are only allowed to feel these certain feelings
Right.
and express these certain emotions. And that's definitely something that we need to break.
Yes, yes, constantly. And I think we've talked about that, oftentimes when we talk about things surrounding young boys, is really helping them be able to express that full range of emotions. But as a society, we need to allow that to happen for adult men who kind of grew up with these messages that they only have this very restricted, they can be angry or they can be happy, and that's it. Well,
Yeah.
that's just completely ridiculous and denies them their full human experience if those are the only two things that they can ever be.
Yeah. Another interesting fact that I found online says that common illnesses such as depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and eating disorders often go undiagnosed in men. So depression and suicide are one of the leading causes of male deaths around the world. So mental health illnesses are definitely a serious matter, and men should be able to talk freely about these problems. So that I thought was really eye-opening. And I know, speaking from just observations and from talking to other people and what I've heard, definitely being like trapped in a box and not being able to talk to someone about something that is bothering you, or not feeling confident enough that you're going to get the help that you need, could lead to depression. It could lead to, suicidal thoughts and things like that. So it's definitely important that we talk about these problems. But besides talking about these problems, what are some things that we as a community can do to kind of overcome these stigmas?
Well, I mean, some of it is modeling, like somehow we have to show,
Yeah.
you can say things, but there has to be behavior, observed behavior that people can see. We have to actively be supporting men and boys to have healthy relationships, no matter who it's with, and what that means, and talking about it in such a way that we aren't assuming that if a relationship is unhealthy, that the male part of the relationship is always going to be the one who's harmful. So, we sometimes, women and even, those of us who work in this particular profession, unwittingly put forth that stereotype, because when we talk about men as it relates to domestic violence, almost exclusively we talk about them as the people that are doing harm. And so we aren't always modeling or being upfront about the fact that men can be victims of domestic violence, and that does happen, and it can be, and that there are barriers for them. And to seeking help and to looking for that. So we have to be extremely conscious about changing our behavior, about being observant for how people are treating each other, in our own social circles, and speaking up just like we would speak up, you know, um, to combating different media messages, to being able to say that's not okay when we see someone making fun of a man or a boy who's being hurt or abused in some kind of way. We have to actively combat those messages and put it out there that it's not okay, and ask for that change to happen.
That is a really good insight. Definitely just, speaking out when you see the problem. And I know that for some people, it might seem like maybe it's none of their business, maybe that, this is something normal in their relationship, or, all these different thoughts and myths. But it's definitely important to talk about the problem and point it out when you see it, be able to help the person, or at least try your best not to be judgmental. But those are definitely really good tips on what to do. One thing that I found interesting that I also read is that men of color are even more likely to have worse mental health than white men. So people of color are likely to experience different problems with their mental health, such as PTSD. And when I read this, honestly, like a lot of thoughts went through my mind just because of everything that has been going on. It makes sense if I think about it myself. People of color have already all these other things to worry about. So just to add on top of that, the trauma is actually bigger. So it creates a lot more, mental trauma. Do you have anything you'd like to speak on that?
Yeah, I feel like this is my self-disclosure episode. I am a white woman. So my experience is so completely different from all of this. But we do know over the last year, it has come out a little bit more, but we have always known that racism is traumatic. Experiences of racism are traumatic. So people who are exposed to racist acts on a daily basis, no matter what it is that they do for being who they are experiencing trauma. And that compounds and grows over time. And the more you experience trauma, the more you're at risk for having some adverse mental health effects related to that. So that's going to happen. That makes sense. I'm glad that more and more people are talking about it, but when you just have all these traumas layered on top of each other, how can you not have
It
some
definitely
type
does.
of mental health impact related to that? And different communities have different thoughts or beliefs about whether it's okay to access mental health support. So there's kind of like there's a general overall stigma, but then depending on particular communities or environments that you come from, there may be even more stigma about mental health or about going outside of your particular community to access assistance for mental health. So those are some additional barriers that could be there.
Exactly. And we do plan on having an episode surrounding this topic. We're going to talk a little bit about how to speak to children about racial biases. So look for that. It's going to be later on in June.
Okay.
That's still being planned, so I'm not giving any more information, but we will talk a little bit more on that. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting. So it's going to be with a teacher.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's about what we have today. Basically, the message that I wanted to send across is that, domestic violence agencies and assistance is not just for women. There are a lot of men who are also experiencing it, who also need the help. And it's very important that not only we who work for domestic violence agencies, but the community in general just learns to be accepting of it and non-judgmental, because it's really important for everybody who is experiencing domestic violence, whether they're being victimized or whether they are perpetrating domestic violence. Because oftentimes the case is when somebody is perpetrating domestic violence is because they grew up in a situation where they witnessed it. And so there needs to be help for that.
Yeah, I think, everyone deserves to have a healthy relationship in order to live into their full humanity. And that does mean, it's a hard mind shift to say, wait a minute, you want me to say that this abusive person deserves a healthy relationship? Well, they do, because
Mhm.
whether they mean to or not, they are denying parts of themselves
That makes a lot of sense.
by not having that, which is, a purpose of having the partner abuse intervention program and the things that they're learning to change their patterns, because it is better for them also to be in a healthy relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like, not that I can read their minds, but I feel like they would rather be in a healthy relationship. They're just not sure how to. A lot of people who have modeled relationships around them, this is what they've seen, this is what they've learned. And so if they are able to learn different ways of being in a relationship and being in a healthy relationship, I'm sure a lot of them would want to as well. But it's difficult. It's difficult to change your ways when you've already seen them and been accustomed to, doing it this way or seeing it this
Sure.
way.
And when you grow up with some possible narratives that you can't trust anyone, that if you're not in control, they're going to control you, and that means bad things for you. Some things that they're living by. Um, that has to feel awful. It has to feel awful that you can't ever trust anyone. So you have set your life up that you do X, Y, and Z as to keep that from happening. I imagine that it feels better to be able to know you can trust someone and to let your guard down. And it's got to be exhausting to never think that that's ever something that you can do.
Yeah. Exhausting and lonely. Definitely, Jennifer. So I would like to go over to Angela and see if we have any questions or comments in the comment section.
Yes, so we do have one question. It says awareness of the broad spectrum of gender identity has been and continues to grow. What are your thoughts on how our culture socializes men impacts people who identify outside the traditional man-woman binary? If you
Oh
need me
my
to say
gosh. Yeah, that's got
that.
it has to be devastating, because our culture generally still does not provide any or a extremely slim margin for identifying outside of this like very specific binary role. So it has to be incredibly difficult to say and to be out there saying I don't fit that doesn't work for me, that isn't me, and then to be able to decide that I'm going to live that out loud and in front of everyone. And that's why we see people who don't fit within that binary are attacked and brutalized and abused and oppressed in just horrific kinds of ways.
Yeah, I imagine that like I mentioned, the communities of color having more significant mental illnesses, just the same how we explained that they have more trauma. They have more barriers, there's more stigmas and so it has to be harder on them. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But here at South Suburban, we do see like no matter what, we see everyone. We're not going to judge you at South Suburban Family Shelter. I'm sorry. But so we do want to let you all know that these services are definitely available for everyone. Any more questions, Angie?
No, no question. Of course, we were just reiterating that our partner abuse intervention program, which, benefits by exploring all the conversations that you all held about the nonviolent and creating equal partnership and relationships. But other than that, there's no questions.
All right.
Thank you, Angela. So Jennifer, do you have any last words? Anything else you'd like to
Oh,
speak on?
gosh, I think it's just important to, this idea of mental health is one that's pretty important to me. And prior to coming here, I did a leadership program where we put out like a whole sort of awareness campaign to kind of break down the stigma. So I'm glad to see that that's starting to happen more and more. And my goal, what I would like to see is for people to address their mental health the same way they address their physical health. So if they start to have a cold or they feel a little under the weather, they know they want to go to the doctor, and for people to start to be able to recognize that also about their mental health, to know that it's okay and it's normal to not feel okay. I have a sweatshirt that says it's okay to not be okay. Because we need to get that message out there that you're not always going to be perfectly happy and, you know, all the time. That's just not realistic. And for people to be able to prioritize that and to feel comfortable taking care of their mental health and recognizing that it is a thing that you can take care of, that it's okay and it's normal to go around and to do that. So hopefully we all can talk more and more. You know, I would love for it to be like normal for people to talk about their therapist, just like they might talk about, you know, their family doctor or, you know, their orthopedist, or, you know, you hear people talk about all these certain other kinds of doctors, or people are very open about going to physical therapy. Do I have to go to physical therapy 2 days a week? Well, I would love to hear people go like, yeah, I go to mental health therapy, you know, once a week, and I'm working on this with my therapist. I would love to see people be able to talk about it that openly and model for each other that that's okay. And that's the kind of support that we all need for different reasons and seasons in our life.
Yeah, you know, I really love this dream of yours. It would be really nice if people did, you know, that they thought about their mental health the same way as they think about their physical health. I do feel like we've got a long way to go, but we're getting there. Fortunately, it is getting a little bit better. We're talking about the topic a little bit more. So that's definitely good. So yeah, feel free to tune in. We're going to be here.
My internet
next
slowed down a little.
I think mine is too. So I wasn't sure if it was mine or yours. Okay, well, thanks everyone for tuning in and watching this episode. We will be here again next Tuesday and the following Tuesday at 2 p.m. It'll be at the same place at the same time, but a different team. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone. Have
everyone.
a great day.